Hey everyone, welcome back for another deep dive. This time, we're headed straight into the world of, well, a pretty dark mystery.
Sounds intriguing, yeah.
It is. We're
Mhm.
going all the way back to 1969
Wow, okay.
and right into the heart of Harvard University.
Oh, Harvard, okay.
We're talking about the murder of Jane Britton. She was a grad student there, and her case, well, went unsolved for decades. It's a story that's kind of become infamous.
Yeah, I can see why. A murder mystery in such a prestigious place.
Exactly. And the book We Keep the Dead Close delves into all of it. The murder, the aftermath, the whole culture surrounding it.
That's what we're here to explore, right?
Absolutely.
Huh.
But it's not just about who did it. The book goes way deeper. It looks at Harvard back then,
Yeah.
especially the experience of women in academia.
I bet that was a whole different world compared to today.
You're telling me.
Right.
And it makes you think, about how institutions protect themselves, the stories they tell or don't tell to keep their image clean.
Yeah. That power dynamic is always fascinating and a little unsettling.
For sure. So let's just lay out the basics, the facts of the case, as they were known back then. Jane Britton, she was studying archaeology at Harvard, found murdered in her apartment.
And it wasn't just any murder. Right.
Wow, it was brutal. A really bad beating. And the police, they just couldn't crack it. The case stayed ice cold for years.
Decades, actually. It was 2018 before they finally found the killer. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. What drew the author to this case in the first place?
Right, right. So the author, Becky Cooper, she was actually a student at Harvard herself when she first heard about this whole thing.
So she had a personal connection to the place even before diving into the research.
Exactly. And it totally captivated her. Not just the mystery itself, but what it revealed about Harvard, the place where she was studying.
That's going to add a whole other layer to the whole investigation, like trying to understand the place where it all happened, not just the events.
Absolutely. And she really committed. Like over 10 years, she spent researching, interviewing people who knew Jane, digging up all sorts of new information. It basically became her obsession.
Wow, 10 years. Talk about dedication to getting to the bottom of things.
I know, right? And you can feel that personal connection the way she writes the book.
Yeah.
It's not just a dry recounting of the facts. It's her journey, trying to make sense of this horrific event, what it says about the power structures at a place like Harvard.
I can see how that would become like the core of the story, not just who did it, but why it happened, what the context was.
Exactly. And one of the most striking things she uncovers is how much sexism was just ingrained in academia back then in the 60s,
Hmm.
and how that messed up the investigation from the start.
In what way?
Well, think about the rumors that were flying around about Jane. People were painting her as somehow responsible for the violence, like she somehow invited it.
Oh man, that's awful. Blaming the victim, that's never right.
It's heartbreaking. Instead of focusing on finding the killer, people were dissecting her personal life, her choices.
Right.
It's like they were trying to find reasons why it was okay that this happened to her.
Just trying to fit it into their worldview, I guess. And the book argues that Harvard itself might have actually hindered the investigation.
Right, like they were more worried about their reputation than finding justice for Jane.
Makes sense, in a way. They wanted to keep the whole thing quiet, avoid any bad press, protect the Harvard brand.
Yeah. There's this one part in the book that really stuck with me. Cooper talks about how some male professors were totally dismissive of the dangers women faced back then. Like women were just overreacting to harassment and stuff.
Wow. Talk about being out of touch.
It just shows how easily women's concerns were brushed aside, their safety not taken seriously. And that attitude, it probably influenced how the police approached the case too.
Yeah, if the people in charge aren't taking it seriously, why would anyone else?
And here's where the story takes a wild turn. So decades later, in 2018, they finally solved the case. Through forensic testing, they identified the killer.
Wow, they did. After all that time, I honestly didn't know they ever found who did it.
They did. But get this, the killer had absolutely nothing to do with Harvard.
Really? Not a professor, not a student, nothing.
Nope. He was just some local guy with a history of violence against women. Someone who was completely off the radar of the original investigation.
So all that focus on Harvard, all those theories about jealous colleagues or something, it was all a dead end.
Totally. It's like the obsession with Harvard, with finding a scandal within its walls. It blinded everyone to other possibilities.
And that right there, that's what this book is really about, isn't it? The assumptions we make, the biases we have, how they shake the way we see things, even in a murder investigation.
100%. And the fact that the killer was eventually found, it's great, brings closure, but it also highlights the flaws in the initial investigation. They were so focused on Harvard, they missed the real story.
It's a powerful example of how institutions, even ones dedicated to knowledge and truth, can end up protecting themselves at the cost of justice.
It makes you wonder, if something like this could stay hidden for almost 50 years, what else is out there? What other truths are buried beneath the surface, waiting to be uncovered?
It's a question we all need to ask ourselves, especially when we're dealing with powerful institutions. We can't just take their word for it. We have to keep asking questions, digging deeper.
Exactly. And if you're interested in digging deeper into this case, into the complexities of truth and justice, I highly recommend checking out We Keep the Dead Close. It's a real page-turner, and it makes you think long after you finish the last page.
Definitely a good one for anyone who likes true crime, but also wants to understand the bigger picture, the societal forces at play.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive, everyone. Until next time.
Hey, yeah.